other elements.
Oh.
And so what you end up having is you have hierarchies of beings that are moving towards that identity, but as they reach their highest point, they actually empty themselves into the higher identity. And then you move up and then you end up with something that is beyond being ultimately.
Okay, so let me try something to you, because that might start to sew the good and the true and the beautiful together. I've been doing a lot on marrying Merleau-Ponty with Plato, and John Rootson and other people are doing this, so I won't. But here, like that thing you just pointed out. So Merleau-Ponty's point is you can never completely see any object. So let's just talk, because the number of just even perceptual aspects is unlimited.
Which was what Picasso was doing.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, there's the imaginal aspects. I can also, all the functions that are implicit in this, all the use, right? And then, so one of the things I've been arguing is that if you take a look at Plato, the eidos originally meant the look of a thing, but he didn't mean the look. He meant something like the aspect. And here's what so you have all of these aspects and they're unfolding inexhaustibly. There's a through, but they don't unfold chaotically. There's a coherent through line that runs through them, right? You get a sense of, as you said, the identity. But here's the thing, that through line is not itself an aspect.
No.
It can't be. Because if you're making a fundamental category.
It's an a priori necessity.
Right, and it runs through it. But notice how, right, first of all, that's starting to get us into a sense of the goodness, because that's the promise being kept. The through line is the promise being kept. It's also a different notion of truth. This is something I want to talk about later if we get a chance. Truth as aletheia, as disclosure, rather than as correspondence. But notice, first of all, how that corresponds to beauty. And think about what Tammy's doing with the paintings. She's, right? Because she's don't stop at this one aspect as the appearance, but open it up. Open up all and see and fulfill the promise.
Yeah.
The aspects.
Even in something horrible.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe that's dependent on your willingness to gaze, which is the story of Exodus and the bronze serpent. Well, and I would say the crucifixion as well.
That's really interesting, because Han talks about we've lost the ability to linger with things. And that's why we can no longer
if
see
chimps are in the jungle and they come across a decent sized snake, they'll stand at a distance from it, but they will gaze at it for up to 24 hours. And they have a particular cry, which is a snake ra, that's the name of the cry, which they utter that brings other chimps. And so they hate snakes, right? Innately.
Yeah.
If you show a rubber snake to a chimp that's never seen one, he'll hit the ceiling, but then he'll look. And so they're out there gazing on the snake. It's part of, they're fascinated by it, despite the fact that it's also simultaneously threatening.
Yes. And so I think that there's increasing evidence for something like awe.
It's awe, definitely. Right. Well, that's manifest in piloerection in animals.
Okay, but think about what awe does. Awe is a kind of love. And one of the things awe does, which is really interesting, it's one of the few instances where people reliably report a sense of the shrinkage of the self that is nevertheless has a positive element to it.
Yeah.
Even though they're terrified, they want to follow it through. They want to go into, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's partly. So imagine this. So imagine awe. Imagine piloerection now. So a cat puffs up, and you know that's the hair standing up in the back of your neck. It's the same instinct.
It is. Yeah. And I'm doing work on this with a student of mine right now, and how we've exacted the piloerection into aesthetic experience.
Right. Okay. So imagine this. Now you're out. You look at the night sky, and it's awe-inspiring. And so there's also a call to imitate there.
Yeah.
And so you see the image of Mary, for example, with her foot on the serpent and her head in the stars. Well, she's looking at the stars, and so that's the cosmic realm, it's the infinite, and now she's awestruck by that vision, and then in order to adapt to that vision of the infinite, you have to imitate that which instills the awe, and that's represented by her foot on the serpent.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, that's for sure. That's there's literally hundreds of Renaissance images of that. Mary, head in the stars, foot on the serpent. And I've been thinking through this awe issue and it has this interesting association with beauty. But you can imagine that when a cat dances sideways and piloerects, it's trying to look larger. It's trying to look as if it can overcome the predator. Well, that's what awe does to us, is that when historically, evolutionarily, what we did when we felt awe in the face of a predator is we felt compelled to imitate the predator so that we could become ferocious enough to overcome the predator.
That's interesting.
And so that's that call to an expanded being that Jung would associate, for example, with development of the shadow. It's like when you look at something brutal, that really terrifies you. It has to call that capacity for predatory behavior out of it, that monstrous capacity. Now, it should be integrated into the kind of ethic that we're describing, but you're not good if you're harmless. It's way more than that. And that awe in the face of what's catastrophic is a call to be more than the catastrophic thing, which certainly makes you monstrous in a sense.
Well, that's really interesting because it's also it also produces sort of increased seeking of others, which makes sense because one of the ways we can make ourselves bigger, band together, and then that seems to get exacted into I don't have to be big, but I can connect or participate in something.
Right.
And then you get reverence as opposed to just raw awe. What's really interesting, just to supplement your argument, and this is work I'm doing with Hong Yu Chen. If you they have a device now that will actually cause people to have chills, the chills up and down their spine. You run cold water up and down in the right way. What you do and what you can do is you can really enhance people's aesthetic experience. But even more basically, you get people to listen to the same passage of music, and you put one group of people in a slightly cooler room, they will have a more powerful aesthetic experience of the music.
Because it facilitates piloerection.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Yeah, I was so thrilled about this notion of piloerection being associated with the instinct to imitate. To put those two things together, it's like, well, what do you do in the face of the predator? Well, one is run away. The other is become superordinate to the predator. And then you might say, well, what's the worst possible predator? Which I think is part of the Judeo-Christian narrative, because we're trying to because the snake in the garden is Satan. It's like, well, what's the worst predator? It's not the snake, bad as snakes are. It's like a super snake. It's a meta snake. It's the sum total of everything that threatens you. And so that calls you to be more than that, whatever that is.
I don't know a lot about the biology, but do animals experience this piloerection with, let's say, a member of their own species that is bigger or more dominating?
Sure.
Yes, they do.
Sure.
And we also have some preliminary, and it's ethnographic, so you have to be careful with it, that they do something that looks like awe. You'll get a monkey, you've got the snake thing, but there's also a video of a macaque monkey, and it goes out onto a precipice, which is a little bit dangerous. To watch a sunrise, not doing anything, it just sits there.
Well, monkeys will look longer if you show them photos of their troop. They gaze longer at the high status individuals as well.
Yes.
And if they are encountering a high status individual who could take them out in some sense, but not merely as an expression of power, as the primatologists insist, then they do show piloerection in response to the threat from the superior. But they're also fascinated by it. And you can imagine that